Darlene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here.
And you have an interesting story about fencing. And
I have lots of
some other
interesting
stuff.
stories about fencing. My fencing career started here in Hackettstown when I was 9. The local recreation program gave you one lesson a week for 6 weeks. You paid $2.
That's a good price.
Yeah, I had a great time. This was a long time ago in a land far, far away. And at the end of the 6 weeks, I had done it with all of my friends. We were all 9 years old. We all got to stab each other and poke each other. I'm an only child, so getting to poke other people was really kind of awesome because I didn't have any siblings to take any angst out on.
I'm not going to touch that.
So at the end of the 6 weeks, the coach told my parents, listen, she's heading towards being an athlete, so here's some more information about what you can do with the sport. And at that time, fencing in New Jersey and in the United States was kind of in its infancy, even though it had been an active sport for so many years. We knew very little about what it was and what it was to become and what it has ended up with and where it's going. If we had known then what we know now, I don't know if we would have taken down this road, but it's been an awesome road. So I started working with a private coach, and I had fun. I thought this was great, and the private coach told us about fencing tournaments, and we could go out into fencing tournaments. And for my 10th birthday, I got some of my own equipment, which was a big deal. And I went into my first event at 10 years old, and it was an open, which to us meant that anyone could come. And I was anyone.
Is that what it meant?
Yes, unfortunately, that is what it meant. The fencing world does tournaments in pools. And there were 6 people in the pool, myself included, and the 5 other women in my pool. The next youngest one to me was 15 years older than me. 2 of them had been already on the Olympic team. 2 of them were college coaches, and 1 had been fencing for twice as long as I had been alive.
No pressure.
No pressure. I got my butt handed to me. I scored at least 1 touch in every bout.
Well, it's not too bad.
Not too bad, but not exactly setting the world on fire. I got back into the car, and I cried the entire way home.
Well, there's no crying in fencing.
Well, no, I wasn't fencing anymore. I was done fencing. And my father was pretty sure that I was actually done fencing, that they were never going to see this again. I cried from Hoboken to Hackettstown. And
That took an hour.
yeah, that was a long cry. So I get out of the car at home, and I told my father I never wanted to lose that badly ever again. And that's what started the whole road to fencing. My fencing career continued. We fenced in local tournaments and worked our way up to nationals. By the time I was 13, I was competing on the national level. When I started high school, we had the same coach who would run the recreation program, which was pretty cool. Except there was no girls' team. So I fenced on the boys' team. It wasn't a thing then. It wasn't a big deal. No, it just was.
You did what you did. That's it.
Nowadays,
Seemed like a big deal anyway.
But nowadays, you have the girl going out on the men's wrestling team,
Yeah.
and they make a big deal out of it, and the girls who are playing football. But back then, nobody thought anything of it because you just did it, and nobody gave you a hassle, and you went about your day. I am one of the only women in the state of New Jersey on the men's all-state team because I fenced my freshman year on the boys' team, which was to me wasn't a big deal. It was a lot of fun. At the end of my freshman year, our coach quit. He wanted to see his wife or something stupid like that, you know.
What a foolish thing to do.
So I panicked because I had already heard that there were scholarships and I could get into college doing this because I was getting to the point where I was getting national points and national recognition and having fun. And so I asked the principal what I needed for a fencing coach. And he told me somebody with a teaching certificate. So I bought myself home and told my mother, guess what? You're the new fencing coach. Congratulations. And at that time, I had just started taking lessons in New York City. 15 years old, going into the city usually twice a week, and competing on weekends. One of the nights that we went into the city to go for fencing, club was very busy that night. Lots of fencers. There's this British guy with long hair. Fencing. He's warming up. He's fencing with everybody else. I recognize him as the lead singer for Iron Maiden, Bruce Dickinson. But in a 15-year-old's mind, okay, he's a fencer with long hair who happened to be British.
What year was that?
This was 85.
Oh, okay, so they already became big.
This was actually right before the release of Power Slave.
But 85.
Maiden-
They were big in Europe. They're
Yeah,
probably
Maiden
not
was
in the US,
huge in
because I
Europe.
remember having an album of theirs in 1982.
Yeah. But that was also Blaze and or Paul Di'Anno.
Yeah, right, yeah. Paul.
I had a friend who was in a cover band called Iron Fist. So that's how I recognized him. And I'm like, oh, wow, Todd's going to go ape when I tell him that I met him. But to me, he was another fencer. We fenced for most of the night. I took my fencing lesson.
Oh, was it at the school?
No, this was in
Or
New
the
York City at the club that I trained at.
Oh, it was a club. Okay.
And he actually had a cassette tape of half of Power Slave. No one else had ever heard it before. And I got to listen to it on my Walkman, of all things, at that time.
But only half.
Yeah, well, he didn't have all of it. And
So it was a demo? Is that what it was?
I don't know why he had it. I don't think I've ever asked him why he had it. But he had some of the songs from Power Slave. And the music was great, and I loved it. It was really cool. But I still wanted to go fence him and beat him because I knew at that time that he had points on the British team. He was getting set to be on the British national team. So I really wanted to just fence him and beat him. That was much more of my goal at that time. He and my mother got into an entire intense conversation about the differences between the British and the American educational system and which had more merits.
Well, I would have to side with Bruce Dickinson.
Yeah, most definitely, because their educational system blows ours out of the water. But my mother put up a good fight for the United States.
I can see that.
So I listened to some music, we fenced, we hung out, and it was fun. And I didn't really think anything of it until we were getting ready to leave, and my father says, "Are you going to go get an autograph?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to be that person." No. And my dad's like, "Todd's not going to believe you."
Take a picture.
Fine. No, at that time, nobody
That's
carried
right.
cameras around.
Yeah.
No, you didn't have a
But-
8x10 with the Ansel Adams little
Yeah.
powder thing?
That would have been nice.
Should have gotten the demo.
Yeah.
The demo tape.
There's a lot of things I should have done over the years. There's a T-shirt from Philadelphia that really shouldn't have gotten lost. But so my mom took the back of her checkbook and gave it to me. And he was on his way out the door, and I said, "I hate to do this, but can I ask you for an autograph?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, that's not a problem." He's like, "Do you come all the time?" I'm like, "Yeah, and I'm here twice a week." He's like, "Every time I'm in New York, I'm here." So it kind of like set up like this, all right, anytime you're here, we're going to come and hang out. And that was the first time I met him. The next morning, I take the autograph to school, and I show my friend who's in the cover band, and literally he fell on his knees in the middle of the hallway and goes, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, he was really cool." And we fenced. He's like, "You fenced with him?" I'm like, "Yeah, and I beat him in a couple of battles." He's like, "Why? Why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that." I'm like, "Because he was making mistakes." I'm not going to let him win just because he's a British guy with long hair. He's like, but he's a god. I'm like, no, he's a short guy with long hair with a really good British accent. And so we, over the years, got to be really good friends. And every time he was in New York, he was at the club. I would see him all the time. It wasn't until about 2 years later that he and I actually got into a relationship. My running joke is the fact that my husband tells me that I may have dated a rock star, but he got to marry me. So, in fact, Bruce and him are actually very good friends. I've actually left them alone together, which I didn't think it was well advised, but it actually ended up being okay.
Well, it's been since the, 30 years.
You got to be alone with him. Why shouldn't he?
Well, at that time, it was very funny because when I first started dating him, his hair and my hair were the exact same length and the exact same color, and it would get confusing. And
I don't think I ever confused my hair with
Okay.
we used to go fencing. We would, fence until we almost couldn't stand, and then we would go out, and he had a favorite sushi bar that wasn't far from the club. And one of the nights we were out for sushi, we would play games with the sushi and, close your eyes, open your mouth, guess what it is, and 2 or 3 bottles
Once
of sake.
again, no cum.
Yeah, right?
Pufferfish.
No, sea urchin.
Okay.
Fish might kill you.
No, sea urchin if you...
Oh,
nah,
yeah,
anyway.
that's actually good.
It's a texture thing.
I know it is. Yeah. I'm not a fan, but I had it.
I'm a much bigger fan of the sea eel than...
Well, eel is different.
Eel is better. But we'd go through 2 or 3 bottles of sake between the two of us, and when we'd leave, I had a really bad habit. I'm taller than him. I had a bad habit of always wearing heels anytime we went out.
Oh. That's just mean.
Awkward.
That's been really funny. The one night we were coming out, I don't know if we were celebrating his birthday or my birthday. We were out for a reason. And I had flowers and there were balloons involved. And we came out of the restaurant and we got mobbed by this gaggle of girls. I don't know how they knew where we were or if they just recognized him, but it was odd that there was a group of girls and they were like, oh, it's Bruce, it's Bruce, it's Bruce. And so I stepped to the side and I'm leaning against the lamppost watching all of this, amused as all get out. And one girl turns and like, who's she? And he's like, just a lady friend. And I'm laughing, and I thought it was the funniest thing. He's like, listen, I gotta go. And other nights that we'd been out with the band, they used to stay at the Park and Meridian all the time, right off of Columbus Circle. Walking distance or staggering distance from the Hard Rock Cafe. They loved going down to the Hard Rock, and it would be, Adrian would bring, at that time it was his girlfriend, she wasn't his wife yet. Bruce would have me, Nico would be by himself. Steve half the time wouldn't come with us, but he'd come occasionally. But the girls would be the hardcore drinkers, and then we'd stay until closing time, and then we'd steal the flowers off of all the tables and see who could walk a straighter line back to the hotel.
Well, you can't get pulled over for walking.
Right, walking while intoxicated. But it was incredible because they were normal people. And the only thing that made them different is the black Amexes that they'd pay out, would they'd stick their manager with the bill 90% of the time. They'd all duck out before the bill came.
Well, that's a good move.
So, all throughout all this, we had fencing in common. And especially when I was in college, he did cool things like he would show up at events. They were on tour. We were at NCAA championships in South Bend, Indiana, and he comes walking in the gym.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Columbia University.
Oh.
So he came into the gym, and to surprise me, they'd come from one of the concerts, and he had the bus drop him off. And it was great because he would come fence, warm up with me. He always had his gear with him. Nico's drum kit and his fencing bag. And he would show up at the oddest times, but some of the coolest times. So I won my first national championship at women's epee in New York City, 1986, and he showed up at the beginning of the finals. And I was all excited to see him, and he's like, yeah, no, turn around, get your head back in the game. You got a tournament to go fence and to win. And I did, and it was really cool because my parents were both there, but he was also there. So he's been in and out of our fencing life since then. And we traveled and had there was amazing stuff that we did. Because of his touring, he needed places to fence in Europe, and he allowed me to go to one of the places that he used to train in Germany. And I spent 2 summers training where he trained in Germany
That's pretty cool.
It was 6 weeks, and it was great because I left the United States and got on a plane and took a train and ended up in Bonn, West Germany, and you're like, wait, I forgot, I don't speak any German. The fencing center there was set up so that they had 3 levels of fencing there. There was the students who were there, and they actually lived in dorm rooms and went to school during the day and then fenced in the afternoons to the evenings. There was the military contingent, which was they would do their military service in the morning or during the day and then would fence in the evenings. And then there was the fencers who were on the either Olympic team or the national team who were there all the time. And they were always visiting fencers. At the time, the first time I was there were 2 other Americans and myself, 2 guys from England, both of which who knew Bruce. And I stayed for 6 weeks, and breakfast was at 6. Fencing was from 8 to noon. You broke for lunch. You were back in the gym at 1. You fenced through to 7. Dinner was from 7 to 8. And you were in the bar by 9.
That sounds like a good schedule.
It was 5 days a week, and they would do a small tournament on Saturdays, and then you'd have Sundays to yourself. But I did that for 6 weeks, flew home, landed in LaGuardia on a Thursday night, flew out on Friday to nationals, and won nationals on Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah, the training was intensive, and they don't mess around. You start fencing there when you're 5. And the coaches have their nannies or other fencers, or their students are the nannies, so the little kids are running around the gym. And I was taking lessons from a coach who was visiting from France. So here I am, an American who doesn't speak any German, whose French is lousy, taking lessons in Germany in French. And
somehow it works out.
Somehow it works out. Well, the international language for fencing is French. Everything is done on the international level in French. They've switched now primarily to English, but
I think that was just to piss off the French.
Well, the French, and unfortunately, are the holders of the rule book, which is 650 pages, and they keep saying that, there's a new translation, so we're going to change this rule. Fencing has evolved a huge amount since those early days that I started fencing. We joked that there's a whole bunch of little asterisks after my name. I was the first woman in the all boys, all state, first under 19 women's epee championship. Women at that time were only supposed to fence foil because we were going to get hurt in epee, and they didn't want to talk about fencing saber. But I liked fencing epee because I got to fence the boys or whoever I was dating at the time.
It's just stabbing all your boyfriends.
Well, and it was a great way to get out of being grounded, which I had done several times. So women's epee became the first of the breakthrough weapons for the women. And I was the first time that women fenced epee on the NCAA level. First time it was fenced internationally. I got to do them both. I fenced for the United States when we were down in the Junior Pan American Games, and it was the first time women's epee had ever been competed internationally. So when you fast forward to the Sydney Olympics, when Marielle Zagunis won the first women's saber Olympic gold medal, I really, really wanted her to send me a thank you note, because if it wasn't for the people that I grew up with fighting so hard, it wouldn't have happened as soon as it did. And it would have happened eventually, just like any of the breakthroughs would have happened eventually. But it's actually kind of cool to look back retrospectively and go, I'm a first in something. And we are very much, when we're here fencing, we have a very much of an empowerment. My husband's favorite line is the fact that fencing teaches a very important life skill, especially to the younger fencers, that your actions have consequences and you have to live with those consequences. There are very few sports that your actions have direct consequences. If you don't kick the soccer ball in the right place, somebody else can kick it back to you. If you don't make the right move in fencing, you're going to get hit and lose the touch. So it is much more of teaching these kids that they have to learn control and to manage and to be responsible for their actions. So it's a very cool life analogy, which I never thought about until we started coaching the younger kids, especially.
Does your husband fence too?
Yes, he did. He did fence. He's now primarily coaching.
Okay.
I still compete, not as much as I should, but that's one of the best things about fencing. Is that I used to say you could fence as long as you could walk, but now we have this unfortunate advent of wheelchair fencing, which is exploding in the United States, and is an insane sport because the explosion came, unfortunately, after the first Gulf War. You had all of these veterans returning with horrific injuries. Kessler Institute in South Orange was one of the first places to start rehabbing amputees in the mind of getting them back into a sport. Long before Victor Pretorius, whatever his name is, with the artificial legs.
Oh, the guy's
Yeah.
in jail now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Incredible runner, but yeah, not a great boyfriend.
Shoot your girlfriend. Go to jail.
But they started with the thought of bringing something else into these people's lives, and fencing has been one of
Well,
those things.
South Orange is Columbia High School.
Yep, and
I used to teach there. So
yeah, one of the.
I don't know anything about fencing, but I know they're always good at fencing.
Yeah, well, fencing has a whole bunch of really cool things. It is one of the only sports that's been competed in every single Olympics that's ever been held. It's one of those weird things.
I read that today.
Yes, I'm
in
sure
my
you did when you
bare
researched
minimum research of fencing.
It is the fastest growing sport in the United States. Highest population of fencers in the country is here in New Jersey. California and Texas used to try and give us a run for their money, but they keep losing out. 90% of the Olympic team is either from New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. When the Olympics were talking about doing the under 18 Olympics, they came to the United States Fencing Association for the setup because we had it in place.
But they do have the Junior Olympics, right?
Well, Junior Olympics are different as far as the fencing world is concerned. That's our junior nationals.
Oh.
But we have age categories starting as young as Y7, which is you have to have just turned 6. So they can be 6, 7, or turning 8 to fence in the Y7 events. So there's
Wow,
Y7.
that must be hilarious.
It is. But we have uniforms for the kids that small, and you'd
Most
be.
restaurants won't even give them a knife. Give them a saber.
Yeah, we give them a saber.
I can see the onesies from here.
So, but we do Y10, Y12, Y14, and then you go cadet, which is under 17, and juniors, which is under 20, and then you go into open competition. So there's a much wider variety now than there was when I started. 9-year-olds fencing 25-year-olds. So the sport has exploded, and it's one of the most underutilized scholarships for women, and it is number 2 most underutilized for men.
And those scholarships are usually in really good schools, too.
Yes.
It's not going to be a community college.
Every single Ivy League school has fencing. Every single school in the Big Ten has fencing. Schools like you would think, MIT, RPI, Cal Poly now has a team. They didn't used to. A Hackettstown graduate went to Cal Poly and took their club and turned it into a varsity sport.
Nice.
When he got there, they're like, oh, yeah, we've got a club team. Oh, yeah. Okay, we got to get the girls out of here. They got their stuff in the back, so hold on one second.
Okay. Again, I said I did a bare minimum research about fencing, but since I am not an expert, what is it?
What do you need to know? Fencing has its roots in every culture around the world. Every single culture has some form of fencing. Everything from the early Egyptians, there's been blades found. The primary background of modern fencing comes from the French and English background. The foil, which is the smallest and lightest of the three weapons, has the smallest target. It is no arms, no head, no legs. It is your torso only. It would be what was trained for in the salons when you were training for a duel. Mm. It was fought primarily by the aristocracy because they were the only people who could afford to die. Or afford to pay
or to afford
to pay someone to die for you.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Hence your second. That is modern foil fencing. It has its origins there. Epee is the heaviest of the three weapons. Whole body's target. I can hit you in the toe, I can hit you in the backhand, I can hit you in the head. That has its origins in the musketeers. Because you insult me. Mm-hmm. I challenge you to a duel. Mm. But I challenge you to a duel to first blood. Because you and I are working. We can't afford to die. We have families to support. Yeah. So I go like that. I show the second that there's blood on my blade, we're good. We go and have a beer. So that's where...
Or mead.
Or mead. My husband makes it. He makes his own mead. We actually have 5 batches now from our own bees.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
You have bees, too.
Yes, I bought him bees because I was running out of honey. It was too expensive to buy, so I bought him bees so I could get the honey so he could make me the mead.
How many hives do you have?
We got 3.
Oh, wow. That's a fair amount.
Yeah. And one of them was a rescue hive.
A rescue hive?
Yes.
You go to a shelter?
Well, almost. A friend of mine, his brother passed away, and his farm was sitting basically abandoned while they were working out the probate and everything. And I was talking to him about the mead and the honey, and he's like, my brother has a hive. He says, but nobody's taking care of any of that for months, so...
Oh, no.
Well, the bees are.
Go up there and... Well, no, he was figuring that the bees had taken off.
Oh.
So we go up there, and I go up first, and I'm like, okay, there's all this stuff, and I know how expensive this stuff is. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll bring him, and we'll take this stuff, and I will save lots of money.
Yeah.
Well, that was a really good idea, or it seemed like a good idea at the time, until we realized that the bees were still in the hive. And as he went to pick it up, the hive toppled over, and he ended up covered in bees. And it was a Sunday, so he called somebody who did hive retrieval, and he walked us through setting the hive back up and turning it over, and we actually went and got a rental truck and drove the hive home, and the hive survived. Wow, of all things. We don't know how it survived. It was really, really strong hive, and this year we got 25 pounds of honey.
That's a nice size.
Huge amount of high. So like we've got 6 batches of mead going.
Wow.
So each hive gives you about 8 pounds?
It depends on the hive, depends on the bees, depends on the season.
Flowers are finicky.
Yeah, but we're lucky in Hackettstown because you've got Donaldson's.
Yeah, you do.
You've got Alstead. They'll travel up to 15 miles to get...
Yeah, you're in a good spot if you're in the middle of the city.
So,
you're not getting anything.
Yeah, but yes, so we would go and have a mead.
I'm up for it.
Well, which is really funny because he and I met actually at the Renaissance Fair in New York.
That's his thing.
There's a reason I'm drinking this mug.
Yes. I have one of those without the lid.
I just go dressed like this.
But I also had acted in New Jersey's Ren Fair.
Oh, yeah?
And I worked for a clothing vendor in New York.
You probably know the same people.
Yeah.
We might, yeah.
I'm sure we do. I'm also one of the only women in the Rogues Guild.
Oh!
He was head of the Assassins Guild. So, London Armory is part of our... Yeah, so... Which is also what helped with the fencing, because the fencing, I would do the stage
Oh,
combat.
that's right. You can do, yeah, you can do that.
And high school play. Senior year, we did Tom Jones, and I got to do fight choreography for this fight scene using sabers from the team. And it's actually kind of cool because we tell the kids that even if you don't fence in college or you don't do it actively to compete in the sport, it can get you into the stuntman's union. And the stuntman's union is actually pretty awesome because you're paid from the moment you get on set to the moment you leave, whether you're in front of the camera or not.
It's almost as good as being a teamster, but not
Almost. But we have lots of friends who went from the fencing to the jousting. Justin, why can't I think of Justin's last name? Blonde, short hair from, he used to be one of the lead jousters in New York. Paul Adams.
Yeah.
One of my, I'm really close friends with Paul. He's awesome. But we used to do all the fight scenes at the New Jersey Ren Fair, and I've fought broadsword, I've fought rapier. My husband fought life steel. He does rapier main gauche. For our wedding, we actually had custom-made matching daggers made for us.
How romantic.
Some people
Papa
go with a
Pat.
cake.
Do you remember Papa Pat from New York? He was the blacksmith.
I might.
We're talking, 99, 2000.
No.
Okay.
That was before my regular visitations there.
Okay. Well, Papa Pat was the blacksmith at New York Ren Fair, and he was also a minister, and he's the one who married us.
Oh.
And he had done marriages for 25 years and only had one divorce.
Well, that's a good record.
Yeah. Well,
Depends on
because
your point of view.
Yes, conditionally, that's a good record.
so, and the last of the three weapons is saber.
Okay.
Saber is the cutting blade. Everything from the waist up is target.
Okay.
It was fought traditionally on horseback by the cavalry, which is why the cutting motion, because if I knocked you off your horse, I got to keep your horse.
Oh.
And a well-trained war horse was literally worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
I could use it to pay my taxes. I could use it to dowry my daughter. I could use it to sell to somebody else.
Now the saber, is that still still got the curved blade?
No.
Okay.
It has
Scooch forward a little.
become, yes, because my chair's squeaking.
The squeaking.
It's squeaking, and that mic is very
So
sensitive.
the blade has become much more narrow and is much more flexible. Saber was the last one to become electric because you can hit with the point of the blade as well as the side. So it was the hardest for them to figure out how to electrify everything.
Okay. Again, my minimum research. I found out about how they're electrified. Tell
Okay.
them, because I don't want to talk about it.
When you're fencing foil, you have a vest that has metallic fibers sewn into the vest. If you want to grab one, it's right over there. The silver ones, the shiny ones. Okay. This is the fabric. This is stainless steel.
Well,
My wife would love one of these.
no, you don't want to wear this when you're going through the airport. Spring.
No.
But you want to wear this to Studio 54. You go back in time.
So the metal fibers touch the blade, and the blade has an insulated body cord that runs down your arm and hooks into a tether.
Okay.
If you've seen any of these Olympic fencing, it is all now wireless, and you have actually a battery pack on your back
Right.
that transmits the signal to the machine. So when your blade touches your opponent's jacket, it completes the circuit, makes the light go on. In foil, if I hit you in the arm, it doesn't complete the circuit, but it activates the button and you get a white light, which means that it's off target. When it touches the metal, you get a colored light.
Okay.
And epee is just a simple on-off switch because you can hit anywhere.
Right.
Which is why our fencing strips are made out of metal and are grounded so that if I hit the floor, it doesn't register.
Oh, okay.
Because your
Makes
feet are
sense.
target.
Yeah.
What was the story of the Russian? Was it a Russian dude that was cheating?
Yes.
And
Well,
he
there's
got-
been a lot of
oh, sure.
cheating
There's more
throughout
than
the-
one. But there was there was like a funny story.
what
I
it
heard.
was is
Well, your mom told me. That's
yes,
fine. No, like I
as the fencer was going forward, it was a Russian against an East German. and it was at World Championships. As he went forward, he would push his hand closer to the guard. And he had a frayed piece of wire inside the guard, and as he pushed his hand forward, his thumb would push the wire, making the contact, completing the circuit. So he was getting close, but he wasn't actually hitting the person, and his light was going on, and the other fencer was getting really enraged because he couldn't figure out how this guy was hitting him, and he wasn't feeling it. Because especially in epee, the weapon weighs about 1.5 pounds. And you need 750 grams of pressure. But traditionally, epee fencers do hit hard. You're going to feel it. And this fencer wasn't feeling anything because this guy wasn't actually hitting him. So the guy was getting so aggravated, and the referee wasn't calling anything, and nobody could figure out. He's like, you got to check his weapon. And to the naked eye, it looked like it was fine. So finally, when they were fencing, the East German fencer went in close and then pulled his arm all the way back, and the guy's standing there with his point in midair and the light going off. So they finally took his weapon apart and found the wire, and now there's all kinds of safety checks when they're doing the inspection.
That was the Olympics?
World Championships. So there's been everybody's tried every trick in the book.
I'm sure, but I just thought it was
But it was fun, especially when he finally got caught. He's standing there and his point's in the middle of air and the lights on.
What year was that?
Had to be somewhere in 87-ish.
Oh, so you still had a good chance to end up in Siberia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was probably never heard from again.
He was scratching all the records.
It was a good run.
Well, I mean, fencing's had its share of scandals. One of our very good friends was one of the medical doctors who did the drug testing at the Olympics. And there's a very famous or infamous event where one of the fencers had won, and he was told to report for drug testing, and he went and did his drug testing, and they came out and they told him there was good news and there was bad news. And he's like, oh, what's the good news? And he's like, well, you're pregnant. And what's the bad news? You're pregnant. It was a guy, and he had used his girlfriend's sample, except he didn't know that she was pregnant.
But they found out.
Blackballed for 7 years from every competition.
Now, what kind
worldwide.
of drugs would you take for performance?
Was it just
would there be focus?
recreational
like Adderall,
drugs?
No, it was focus and
like
to
modafinil
keep
or
you
something
calm
like that? Would you
and
take?
stuff like that.
Oh.
So
You wouldn't do steroids.
Right.
Yeah, really.
You don't
2
really-
seconds, I want to check with.
So
Welcome back.
Ask you what drugs are popular for fencers?
To keep yourself calm, to keep yourself focused, endurance. There really hasn't been any big drug scandals in fencing because you need to have your wits about you, because it is physical chess. It is chess at 100 miles an hour. You need to be able to outthink your opponent. Some fencers, especially if you're talking about modern pentathlon fencing, modern pentathlon is one of the coolest parts of the Olympic world. It is also based on historical fact that you are a messenger for the king. You take off on horseback. There's a steeplechase. Your horse takes lane. There's a mini marathon. You come to a river. There's a swimming event. You meet your first opponent. There's a target shooting event with rifles. Mm-hmm. And you meet your final opponent, and it is a one-touch epee event.
Oh.
You have 3 minutes, and you need to score a single light, not a double touch. Insane amount of tactics and strategy and working back and forth. So there's really not any drug that I would think of that could help you when you're fencing.
Well, if somebody gets busted, where do they usually get busted for? Or was it not even talked about?
I don't know. I don't know a lot of people who've been busted. I guess it's either not my realm of people. But
Is Adderall something that you would use for that?
I don't even know if Adderall would help. I mean, it would depend on the person. Most people would want to manage their stress and, be able to increase their focus.
Yeah.
But really, there's nothing out there that can, because it's not like having big muscles is not an advantage in fencing at all.
No,
you need to be
actually disadvantage.
right. You have to be
a bigger target.
Well, you also have to be able to move. You have to be able to have the quickness. One of our fencers who was here tonight, she has an amazing speed. So you look for that. But there's also fencers who don't have that. Fencing is one of the only sports that you can be overweight. You can actually be out of shape. It is low impact. But if you have... We joke because the current Veterans World Champion is 78 years old from the United States. Youth and enthusiasm loses to age and experience 9 times out of 10 in the fencing world. Because as a fencer, you can be patient. You're waiting for them to make a mistake. And if you can capitalize on that one mistake and you can build on it, especially in epee where you can both score at the same time, that's the only weapon that you can. If you're up by 1, you double out, you win the bout. It's actually... It's being patient. It's planning your moves. It's my husband's one of the best strip coaches out there. He can look at a fencer when they're warming up and find their pattern, find their tick, and find how to beat them. So you work strategy, you work timing, you work tempo. We control 3 things on the strip, which is the blade, the distance, and the tempo. And in order to be able to control all 3, you have to have a certain amount of planning. You have to be able to... We tell our fencers, you're lying. You're trying to draw them in. They're on your strip. You're making them do what you want them to do. When you look at it as an outsider trying to analyze the sport, it's really exciting because you're planning... Okay, I'm going to do this action. Well, if I do this action, you do this other action, then I have a counter action. A good fencing frauds can be 5 or 6 moves before somebody actually makes the mistake and a touch is scored. And then the next set, we know that those 5 moves just happened. So we may go, okay, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. It's like the scene from The Princess Bride where you know that I know that you know that I know, and you go back and forth, and you just don't get into a land war in Asia. But that's truly the way the fencing goes. And most fencers will tell you they love The Princess Bride because
I was just going to ask.
The fencing scenes were actually done by an actual fencing coach who did the fight choreography.
No, Errol Flynn.
Well, Errol Flynn was actually an Olympic caliber fencer. Errol Flynn, Zorro, all of them actually learned defense. Antonio Banderas, when they did the remake of the Zorro films.
How about Charlie Sheen?
No. But all of the ones that you see doing the fencing in movies actually learn how to fence. Because it's really kind of hard to fake fencing. Because fake fencing looks like fake fencing. At least to 99% of the fencers out there. And we're not a huge population, but it is a big enough population that people will, make a fuss. When Madonna did the fencing scene in the James Bond movie, it was awful, and all of us knew it.
I think most things Madonna. No.
But
just
she fakes it.
Ragging, but it would make sense to learn how to do something. I mean,
yeah. And it's a lot of fun, and it's something you can do forever. And that's, I fully intend to do it forever.
Do you ever use your skills at the barbecue? Flick shish kebabs?
No, I'm not the barbecue. My husband does that. But, the difference is we talk about the fencing blades. You have the foil, the epee, and the saber. Everybody will say, oh, you're swinging swords around. No, swords have a sharp edge. Ours do not. The foil and the epee have a button on the tip. It is very technological now, especially with the wireless transmitters. When you watch the Olympic fencing and even the World Championships now, they have lights on the side of their masks. They're not helmets. Helmets are for football players. They have.
Can you use that for beekeeping as well?
Actually, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea, but you'd still get stung in the back of the head.
Yeah.
And his bees are persistent. They followed him in the house. They'll crawl in collars.
Oh,
And everybody says, "Oh, you don't want to get stung by a bee." Well, the bee thought you were a
Well,
flower, so they thought you were beautiful. So,
you will get stung if you have bees.
luckily, neither of us have a severe reaction, so we can have our bees. But yeah, I mean, everybody makes fun of the fact that we look like beekeepers.